Well, hell yeah, we're back.
Hell yeah.
Hell, what's up, man?
Hey.
By the way, that's Hale McGranahan from thebigspur.com live in front of the practice facility. Look at this. We have
Nice.
live footage. There's the indoor. Does that get you folks fired up to see that indoor?
I'm gonna put my window all the way down for y'all. There it is.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Beautiful.
It's beautiful. Looks like it,
not,
like a
not
swell. Looks like a pretty mild, cool day in Columbia, Hale, isn't it?
It is not that at all, JC. That couldn't be further from accuracy.
That's why I'm not a weatherman, man. All right, Hale, appreciate you joining us. This is Hale McGranahan from the Big Spur. You guys know him really well, and I guess first things first, Hale. This is first of all the start of practice, and we're going to ask you some of your impressions here pretty soon. But it's the day that the big tree decides, and I've got his last name, Babalade, and I butcher his first name, but kind of break that down for us. Tell us what you think. Take us kind of through his recruitment until now. Obviously, he's been a big discussion on thebigspur.com. Big tree, big discussion, right? Just kind of give us some insight on this guy.
Yeah, 2:00 is his announcement time. South Carolina has been right there in the mix really since, I guess, March is when they offered, and they were able to get him to come down for his first unofficial visit for the spring game. Then he was back in June for an official visit, and of course was back again this past Friday for that cookout, the summer-ending cookout, which was quite a development, as anyone who's been following along knows that it went from last Thursday, him canceling the upcoming Sunday announcement because he was originally scheduled to announce this past Sunday, and people worrying about that. And then as it turned out, he was on the way down to Columbia Friday afternoon, and was quite a change in development, and certainly got the folks over here that work in this building across the parking lot from me. They're really fired up to have him down and put him on that guest list, which was pretty special. If we're going to try to throw around descriptions for what that group was that they had on campus last Friday, and now here we are. He's going to announce his decision in a couple hours, and crystal balls are in for the Gamecocks, and I think that we can trust those, as the man once said, trust the crystal ball.
Trust the crystal ball. Yeah, it was kind of a wild roller coaster last weekend because I think a lot of people were like, there were 4 announcements scheduled. Only 2 of them took place. Gamecocks did go 2 for 2 and got the in-state guys. And then you've got Big Tree going today, Babalade going today. I'm not a big nickname guy, but I'll give the nickname before I butcher the real name. And then we don't know much about Carmelo Taylor. I'm going to ask you about him here in a second. But Hale, you wrote a piece back at the beginning of recruiting that was insightful and prophetic, kind of at the same time, about this class, 2023 class at South Carolina being very heavy on linemen. Let's assume Babalade does come in today. You had Marquis Anderson and Montague Rames last week. There's still some guys on the board, especially on defense. Tell us kind of your impressions of how things have unfolded on both lines of scrimmage.
It's worked out pretty well. When you add Marquis Anderson into the fold and Montague Rames into the fold, that's 2 out of your top in-state guys, regardless of position, and they just so happen to play along the line of scrimmage. Anderson obviously in offense, Rames defensive end. Xavier McLeod's still out there. Got to try to close things down with him. But my point in starting with those 2 in particular is that's key to this class, is being able to get those in-state guys that are serious about you and you were serious about. I mean, there's another one out there who's not really shown any interest in South Carolina, and Monroe Freeling, and staff never really had a shot there, quite frankly. But the guys that they had a shot with, they've gotten 2 out of the first 3, or 2 out of the 3, and another one's got a decision coming up. So I like where they're at. Not only because they have those guys, but they've got some pretty impressive players at other spots too. Linebacker with Grayson Howard. Uh, I love Jalen Kilgore as a player and what he brings off the field. He's very underrated out there, not only by 24/7, but some other folks as well. And they've got some intriguing guys at receiver and a CJ Adams who's a converted quarterback, and he put up some really good numbers last year, first year playing the position, and is kind of that big physical presence that that you need to have in that position group, and he blends with a guy like Kelton Henderson, who's a speedy little wiggle guy from Florida, and they've got a state champion sprinter at running back from Georgia. I mean, it's an impressive group so far, and one that is building for the future, to say the least, and that's going back to what you were mentioning, JC, and when you started this question is the line of scrimmage, man. They needed to address it, and they're not done, but they've done stuff so far and getting there.
Phil, I think down at the bottom of the Nana's Porch chat line, Brian has something for Hale here.
Yeah, definitely. Something I was going to ask you about too, Hale, is what's your take on Harbor? I mean, I know we're showing warm on the 24/7 site here for us, but how realistic are we talking here, man?
I think it's pretty realistic. He came down last summer in June in 2021, and he had some very good things to say about Shane Beamer coming out of that, and as the months went by and he still hadn't visited again, you're like, okay, well, things can go well on a visit, but if he doesn't come back, like it's really hard to think it could be a realistic shot. But you know what? He came back. And not only did he come back for another visit, it was an unofficial visit. He still got that official visit in his back pocket. So to me, if a guy who's saying all those nice things about your program coming back for another unofficial visit, he's got his parents with him. I don't think they were with him the first time. I think he was like with a high school coach and a couple teammates or whatever. But he brings his parents back down for another unofficial. Still got the official out there. I really think they're going to have a chance to bring him back for one of those, and then we'll see what happens. But as it stands right now, they're firmly in the mix, and certainly some big time competition out there. But South Carolina has made an impression, and again, they're in this thing, man.
Hale, where do you like him at? I thought defensive end, edge, I guess is what we call it now. But the more I talk to people and the more I kind of look at him, I don't know that he's not a tight end or a guy you just use in the passing game, sort of like a Bell or whoever. and I know people are like, well, defensive end's probably a more higher value position, but shoot, you get a tight end that runs like that, man. That's that big. If he can catch a lick at all or run routes at all, those are called touchdowns, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I go back and forth and wanted to see what you had to say.
Yeah, I kind of lean in your direction, JC. The biggest thing is, and this is just a general thought, it's not necessarily reflective of Harbor or anything specific to him. But if a guy's talks about like I'd rather play offense over defense, and I think that he kind of has said that in the past, I tend to lean towards just leaving that guy on offense. And if he's serious about being interested in doing some, obvious pass rushing situations, third down, those types of things, that's cool. But yeah, I tend to think if a guy is pretty strong in his conviction on wanting to play offense over defense, and just go ahead and keep him on offense. I think that's just a general rule of thumb for me.
Yeah, I agree. Jarrell Adams was that way. Of course,
Yeah.
he ended up getting drafted as a tight end, but when he came in, the staff, was intrigued by his build at DN. But the D-line coach at the time said, no, he just doesn't have – he has more of an offensive mentality. And, certainly Carolina probably could have used him had he been a DN those years because they had Busta Anderson. I mean, I don't know. But Jarrell, got drafted. Kids from Scotts Branch, lived the dream. But I tend to agree with you too. That mentality, and that's something that I think some of us in recruiting and fans and people like that, we get caught up in the measurables and the speed and the build, and we're like, wow, he's going to be Clowney or somebody like that. But you have to have a Clowney mentality. You have to have, a defensive mentality to get things done. And offensively, it's just, there's not many guys that run like that are that size. So, like I said, he's going to play touchdown. That's what he's going to play if he plays offense. If he can do anything, touchdown. So kind of staying in that general area, Hale, Desmond Omeozulu. Lots of discussion behind the scenes about this guy this week. I know what I'm hearing is I feel better than I ever have about Carolina's chances, but you never know how these things are going to go. What's your take on Desmond? And by the way, Desmond, for those of you that don't know, is a 6'6", 240-pound, actually a defensive end.
Yeah, he's a specimen. And if you could somehow pair him with Rames, that would be quite a group there. Nice little twosome. But yeah, much like UJC, it sounds like South Carolina is almost sort of trending right now. I don't know if I could really label it that way per se, but it sure seems like they're really really in this thing, man. And when you're competing against Ohio State, it's going to be tough, regardless of what position or where the guy's from. But especially up there in that DC area where they've done pretty well here lately. I mean, they do well everywhere, so I guess I shouldn't just try to label that as something in their favor. But another guy who came down here for an unofficial visit and came down again for an official. And before that unofficial visit, I saw him at a camp in Baltimore, the same camp where I first saw Big Tree, the Under Armour camp in Baltimore, and Umeozulu, however you say his last name, I probably butchered it, but Big Desmond was not really feeling South Carolina, but all of a sudden he shows up for an unofficial visit a little later in the spring, and they made an impression and again got him back down. So I don't think he's been back since, unless something went under the radar, which I suppose is possible. There's some sneaky moves last week by that staff and here in Columbia and what they were able to make happen last weekend. But yeah, man, I think it's a credit to Sterling Lucas and his desire to just go out and recruit and make guys tell him no. Like, in the past around here, it's pretty easy for that position coach to just move on from a guy if he didn't really think he had a chance. And Sterling Lucas has shown some gumption, man. That guy's pounded the pavement, and he brought in some pretty impressive prospects this spring. And this guy in particular who we're talking about is in that group. And just so has it, if you convince a guy to come visit, he might actually like what he sees and want to come back. So I think that's a pretty sound recruiting strategy if you're Sterling Lucas or Monterio Hardesty, whoever the case may be. If you can just convince these guys to come visit, you're giving yourself at least a fighting chance, and that's kind of sums up in a nutshell where they're at with this guy.
Carmelo Taylor, behind the scenes, I hear Carolina still feels good. I also hear that, you get sometimes when you talk to people about recruits, you're like, who knows with that guy? And I'm getting a few who knows with that guy. Hell, I'm probably higher on Carmelo Taylor personally than a lot of people, but I just think the kid, he's got things that you're not necessarily going to coach or develop. So I don't know. I kind of thought, man, that's tough that he didn't pull the trigger. I know Virginia Tech had him on campus. It's right there. He's from Roanoke, Virginia, which is right down the road from Blacksburg. But I never thought Virginia Tech led, though. I mean, they were kind of behind Carolina and Penn State and all that. What's your take on him? if you're like me, I know I'm a little confused, but cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, he's an interesting case, that's for sure. I think you just continue to recruit him and try to get him back down for a game, because I don't think he's going to be making a decision anytime soon. That the kind of word that I was hearing is that someone close to him encouraged him to kind of slow down in his decision and not rush into anything. And frankly, like, that's probably not a bad thing for him to do, because his recruitment didn't really get going until like the middle of May. So he went from being a guy we certainly weren't talking about at all a couple months ago to, well, people are freaking out because he hadn't made his decision yet. And it's like, well, this guy just kind of came onto the scene here very recently. And you know what? It might be in his best personal interest, just him being Carmelo Taylor, to take his time, because, sometimes when guys rush into decisions, maybe feelings can change or what have you. But I think it's probably best for him, and just kind of hearing a little bit about him and his background. Like, maybe he should take some time and think this thing through and be really sure about it, because as we've seen with somebody else in this class, Cam Upshaw, sometimes guys rush into doing something that they're not all that sure about, and they still do it anyway. Then they kind of change their mind, then maybe they change their mind again, and probably change again a couple more times. So I think for Carmelo Taylor, again, just the individual, it's probably the best thing for him to just kind of chill a little bit and make sure he knows what he wants to do. And I'm sure if Justin Stepp heard me say that, he'd be like, dude, shut the hell up. Like, stop talking. But just keep recruiting, man, and get him back down in the fall. And maybe if he's watching a game at Williams-Brice, that'll make him know for sure that this is what he wants to do.
Talking with Hale McGranahan from thebigspur.com here on Inside the Gamecocks, the show on the guest line. And I forgot to say, the guest line is brought to you by Meredith Taylor Golf. You heard the ad. She's a former Gamecock golfer, going to be back in the Midlands, fixing your golf game. And it makes me want to move back to South Carolina permanently, even more, because I need help with my golf game. I completely suck. I don't even have any clubs anymore, but definitely, if I got back, I'd give her a call. McKellarEnterprises.org, sponsor of the guest line. So you're out at practice today. I'm sure everybody wants to know, how did Spencer Rattler look throwing the ball around? Anything else that caught your eye?
It's hard to tell how he's throwing the ball around when he's half a field away and they're just throwing on air. And
yeah,
when on air, people who aren't familiar with that phrase, it's just a QB throwing to a receiver. There's nobody covering him. There's no pressure. There's no nothing. Just pitching and catching. But he looked good, man. He threw the ball to Jaheim Bell a good bit. Bell moved around to receiver and tight end and jumped in the front of each line he was in and looks like Jaheim Bell.
Hey, jumping in front of some passes intended for other people last year too, man.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, that guy. Well, hey, when you need your touches and you're not getting them, you gotta go about finding them any way you can.
I never had a problem with it at all. I was like, that he wants the football. Feed that guy, man.
Give it to him. Yeah, damn.
Yeah.
Feed him the ball.
But no, it was kind of a typical first practice, and I say typical first practice in that. We, the media, get to go out there and watch them stretch and do some special teams drills and some ball security drills. And I was a little surprised we got to see some throwing and catching, but we did see some throwing and catching. And, it's not a whole lot to glean from the half hour we were out there. That's for sure.
Sure. Hey, so who dropped a pass in practice so everybody on the message board can panic about him? Anybody drop a pass?
There was one. I don't know if it was a bad throw or not. It was one of the tight ends. Maybe it was Nate Atkins. I don't know. Yeah. People probably picking on his dad here a little too much. Well, maybe not lately with what they've done recruiting wise, but I don't want Nate Atkins to catch any strays just because his last name's Atkins and his dad's the offensive line coach. And Yeah.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Okay, so I'm looking here. The offensive line. Give me your take, and we'll wrap it up here with Hale McGranahan on Inside the Gamecocks the show. Tyshawn Wanamaker versus Dylan Wanham at right tackle. That's awfully interesting to me, Hale, in terms of what the outcome will be there. And is there any chance we'd see both of them in the lineup?
At the same time?
Yeah, maybe somebody slides down the center, and I don't know. I mean, I'm just that would be the position I would kind of because I wouldn't take Lee off the field or Gwen off the field or Nichols off the field.
Yeah.
But I know that center position too. In this offense, you have to know everything and sort of direct traffic. So what's kind of your take on how the line will shake out? Because I think you got like 6 or 7 guys that could be starters this year, which is a luxury. But I just don't quite know how Greg Atkins optimizes all of that.
Yeah, I would think that Wanham's going to have to come back and win that job away from Wanamaker. I don't necessarily think Wanamaker is going to give it up all that easily, even though maybe tackle isn't where he probably projects the best long term. But I think it is interesting that it is genuinely a battle and not just like, oh, Dylan Wanham's back. He's started 30 whatever games playing that spot. Let's just move him back in there. They talk a lot about competition around here. That's a talking point that we hear about a lot from Shane Beamer, and I think that's a good way to sort of foster that is to have a battle like that at a very important position at right tackle. So we'll see. I mean, regardless of how it shakes out with that spot, whether it is Wanamaker or Wanham, like there are going to be guys who need to come in and play at other spots along the offensive line, and it could totally shake things up. Whether it's Javon Gwynn going down, then Wanamaker slides over to play guard, and then Wanham gets on the field, and that's how they roll. Like there's just no telling. And Atkins does like to cross train his guys and have them be flexible and they can play multiple spots. So I guess my take on it, JC, is that regardless of how it looks today, next week, September 3rd, whatever day that is, Georgia State comes in, it's probably going to change in some way, shape, or form before the season is over, and might change a couple different times. That's just the nature of the position, the nature of the game. So I do think it is as intriguing as it gets, though, for offensive line storylines when you've got a real veteran guy like Dylan Wanham who's having to battle for his starting job to get it back.
All right, wrapping up. Last question. Phil, we're going to pull this from Brian. Brian is a prolific questioner on the Nana Sports chat line today. One more for you, Hale, and then we'll get out of here and all that good stuff.
Yeah, good. And I wanted to touch on this too, Hale, is like, have you noticed any difference in the way the staff recruits compared to the last regime, is what Brian asked, like a different strategy or philosophy? It seems like they're doing what Muschamp tried to do in Florida and South Carolina. What I would add is, we know Beamer is a known quantity in recruiting. And do you think that just having him there is going to, help recruiting, like what we're seeing with Lucas or Montario Hardesty? Is his mentality going to raise all of their mentalities?
As far as strategy, it's very similar. The biggest difference is this staff emphasizing more of the Northeast. Now, granted, the previous staff did try to work up into Virginia as it got further into that tenure, but the biggest difference again is going up into the Northeast. New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, up in that part of the country where Pete Lembo is obviously tied in, and Beamer's obviously a Virginia guy, so he's worked up in that area and around DC a good bit. And again, the previous staff tried to make some inroads up there kind of later on while they were here. But I mean, as far as how they structure it, it's very similar in the way they break things down. From, all right, you're going to have a coach who recruits, Columbia, and he might be coaching the tight ends, but if there's a defensive end at Richland Northeast High School and they're serious about recruiting them, then the defensive ends coach is going to kind of take the reins and really play a role in recruiting him. And while the area guy is still involved, it's more of the position coaches who recruit their position for the guys they're pretty gung ho about. So, and aside from the Northeast thing, I think personalities is the biggest difference. Shane Beamer and Will Muschamp are different people, obviously, and while they do have some of the same kind of characteristics and what they believe in from that recruiting standpoint, maybe things are a little different when they're interacting with people and things like that. So and some of that stuff that I'm referring to is probably kind of obvious for people who are familiar with both of those individuals. But as far as like a nuts and bolts thing, it's very similar, and I think some people kind of lose sight of the fact that previous staff, they signed some really good players, and they got really good players to come visit. Like people get fired up about some of these guest lists that we talk about that Beamer and these guys are bringing in for cookouts and spring games and practices, whatever. The previous staff did a lot of the same stuff too. Like let's not lose sight of that. They recruited pretty well. Maybe some of their shortcomings were in the evaluations at some positions, like wide receiver, for example. But as far as like the actual execution, what they're doing, and all that type of stuff, it's very similar. And a lot of it is stuff that you would want to be similar because there's been some success there, and it's a formula that's kind of tried and true across college football, not just here at South Carolina.
All right, Hale, man, appreciate you jumping on. Hopefully this is the first of many interviews on Inside the Gamecocks, the show. We certainly appreciate you, and good looking interior on that car, and I like the CBS hat, man. That's
thanks. Hey, black leather. It gets hot in here, but the AC still works, so we're good.
Good, man. Good. All right, Hale. You be good. We'll talk to you soon, man.
All right, fellas. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Hale. Hale McGranahan from thebigspur.com has had the honor. Actually, when we look back on this, Phil.
I hear that coming from downstairs.
Phil. My bones. Where are my bones? Anyway, again, the guest line is brought to you by Meredith Taylor Golf. You'll hear the commercial. McKellarEnterprises.org if you want to get your golf going really well. Very interesting stuff, I think, from Hale. It's a lot of stuff that I've talked about before, but he has a unique perspective on it. And, I thought his answers were very interesting. And I think, too, Phil, he brings up a point about the former staff and their recruiting. I don't think the long and short of it is I don't think they did a bad job. I think there were certain positions that were thin, but you look at some of the players Muschamp brought in. You just mentioned Jaheim Bell. That was Bobby Bentley and Will Muschamp who signed that guy. Marshawn Lloyd was a guy. Zach Pickens and Jordan Birch were signed by that staff. So, and I think it's a good thing they did it because now the Beamer staff just picks up kind of where they left off. They're kind of, expanding a little more and doing a better job in Florida than the previous staff did. And I like the fact they're recruiting more speed at receiver too. All right, top of the hour break. So we got to pay some bills here. We'll be back on the other side. Going to talk about bowl season. ESPN, those guys have been getting creative. They're going to change the world over there. It seems their football writers are. And maybe a solution for fixing it. Have some good news from Carolina Rise that I want to share with you guys. Going to talk a little about Clemson. I know you guys are going to like that. There was an ACC coach that sort of beat them up a little bit anonymously in Athlon. And then, of course, the I Help Consulting mailbag, along with the Nana's Porch chat line. We love to be interactive here. You guys are killing it with the chat line and everything else. But again, we got to go pay some bills. really quick. Hour number one again, Cindy, Sear Falls, Caldwell, Banker, Kane, 864-414-5271. We'll be back with hour number two, which also has a sponsor right after these messages.